Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. In today's video, I'm going to be wrapping up the 27 books I read for the first half of September. I can't believe we are already halfway through September. I've already had some great reads so far for the month and can't wait to chat about them. I'm going to attempt keeping this short. We'll see how it goes. I always go in thinking like whether I'm writing Goodreads reviews or my Instagram posts, I'm always like, yeah, I'm going to keep it short this time. And then, I end up going over the character limit for Instagram, or like on Goodreads, my reviews are always super long. So yeah, for today's video, I want to try to keep it short. We'll see how it goes. Usually though, for my videos and my wrap-ups, I'm pretty good at keeping myself talking about each book for maybe like 2-ish minutes, which I think is pretty good for how many books I have to talk about. So we'll see how this one goes. But if you ever do want to see more of my thoughts, my full reviews on any of the books that I talk about, or the books, in this video, I do have always my Goodreads linked in all of my videos, like in the description of every video. You can find like all the ways to find me, whether on Instagram or Goodreads or whatever. But so without further ado, let's talk about the 27 books I have read for September so far. So first up, I read Sweet Christmas, and this one is a like Christmas novella following Sweet Dandelion, which is a forbidden student teacher romance that I read in August. So this one, definitely read it after you've read Sweet Dandelion already. This follows the couple. This is like their first Christmas together after all the events that happen in the first book, which is Sweet Dandelion. This is available on Kindle Unlimited. It was just fun to see the couple again, fun with all the like holiday Christmas activities. One of my issues I had with Sweet Dandelion is that I thought it was missing the hero's POV. Like I really wanted to get some of his side of the story, and so this novella is actually told all in his POV, which was nice to see. But yeah, so this one was cute and fun. Gave it 3.5 stars. Next up, I read The Outpost. This is the fourth book in Devney Perry's Jameson Valley series. I started reading her Jameson Valley series back in August, and so this is the next book that I had to read. This one I'd heard lots of great things about it before I read it, so I definitely went in with like higher expectations, so maybe that affected my rating of it. I definitely did enjoy this one, but I didn't love it. I think I ended up giving it 3.5, 4 stars. So in this one, the heroine is an investigative reporter in Seattle, and she recently took down an entire like mafia gun running operation when she went undercover. So now those guys are, after her, so she goes on the run. She joins her best friend in Montana, which is where the series takes place, and then they end up putting her up in the Outpost, or like a little cabin out in the middle of nowhere to kind of protect her. So it ends up being her and the hero up in this outpost in the mountains for months on end. He'll like come and go, bring her food and things like that. This one is definitely slow burn. I enjoyed it more than some of the other ones in the series, but it's not one of my all-time favorite Devney Perry reads. So yeah, 3.5, 4 stars for The Outpost. Next, I read Beyond the Roses by Monica James. I read this one because I'm going to be seeing this author at the Love in Vegas event in October. And so I wanted to read more of her backlist. Like in the past, I had only read her, whatever the trilogy is for the Bad Saint book. So I didn't know much about this one except for that it had a really pretty cover. This one is a heavier read. It deals with like terminal illnesses, medical treatments, and mental health. I really have a hard time even saying this was a romance. Like it felt very much more like a love story. And like, I guess you could say it's a romance as far as if you also believe that A Walk to Remember or Me Before You are romances, like in that aspect, then sure, it's a romance. So in this one, the heroine, she is 25. She's from a rich family. She has an inoperable brain tumor when the story starts. So she ends up going to this summer camp where there are also like terminally ill children. They can just, forget and be children for the summer. And so she ends up volunteering there. And then she meets the hero, who is a doctor at the summer camp. So when I never really got connected to the characters, I felt like they were a bit just surface level for me. So I wasn't really feeling their romance. But we do get like their medical journeys along the way, which is kind of what kept me interested in the story and to see where it went. So yeah, 2.5 stars for this one. Next, I read Riffs and Refrains by Devney Perry. This is part of the Hush Note standalone series. This is book 2. There are 3 books in the series and each one is written by a different author. So you can definitely read these as standalones. And I gave this one 5 stars. I really loved it. This one, the heroine is the female drummer of the band, which is called Hush Note. She left home when she was 18 and has never looked back. But now when her grandmother ends up passing away, she ends up going back for the first time in years. And the first person she sees is her ex-boyfriend / her ex like only love from high school. So I really love this one. It's been like 9 or 10 years since the heroine has been back to her small town in Montana. She definitely has a lot to reconnect with the hero, and then also with her family, who she hasn't spoken to in years. Grandmother is really the only one that she talked to when she was away, and then now with her passing, like she just feels kind of lost with her family. Heroine's father is a pastor, and so she always felt kind of that he was embarrassed like by her life choices, like that, the clothes she wore and the music she was into. So she has definitely some hard things to work through with her entire family. And then the hero, he has gone through some things while she's been gone as well, and he's now a single dad to his son. And the son is super cute in the romance because he loves music and wants to be a drummer like the heroine. So that was fun to see her moments with him. I love the second chance romance, lots of longing, lots of angst. While rock star romances don't usually work for me, this is one that I actually loved. I love seeing people like just work on their craft and hone their skills, not really the whole like touring and and the fame aspect of being a celebrity rock star. Like, that's not really what I'm into. So I really enjoyed this one because it wasn't about the flashy concerts or like the whole tour life. So yeah, 5 stars for this one, and I really loved it. It's one of my all-time favorite Daphne Perry books. I read The Bitter Root Inn, which is book 5 in the Jameson Valley series by Daphne Perry. This is her first series, and so going back to it after reading some of her newer stuff, there's definitely been more hits and misses for me in this series. This one I actually really enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars. This one is a single mom romance, and then the hero is full of tons of secrets. So in this one, the heroine is a single mom to her little boy, and then she also owns the Bitterroot Inn, which is named after Montana's state flower. If you didn't know that, I did not know what the bitterroot was, so that's what that is. So this one I really liked the heroine. I really love like hotel type settings. I used to work in hotels a long time ago, and so I just love that, like, you know, all of her ideas about the business and just her passion for trying to make her business and the hotel better. So one day the hero walks into the inn and needs a room, and the heroine is like instantly interested in him, and then we get the hero's POV and we find out he has tons of secrets of like why he's following the heroine and why he is in Montana. This one was super cute. I loved seeing the hero hang out with the heroine's son, and kind of that's why I like single parent romances, when the kids are like part of the story as well. So the heroine definitely has some trauma from her past because her ex, which is the father of her child, ended up kidnapping her, drugging her in the past, and like kidnapped her and her friend together, and the heroine actually ended up killing him in self-defense, which this is all talked about throughout the entire series leading up to this book. I definitely liked the beginning part of the story more. Towards the end, it kind of made me frustrated with the heroine because she's all of a sudden surprised when she learns the hero's secrets, even though he had been trying to tell her like for quite a while and wanted to bring it up to her, but she'd always be like, oh no, like if this is gonna make things bad between us, like don't tell me, I know you have secrets, like I don't want to hear them. It's like he was trying to tell you this whole time why he was there, or, you know, finally confess his secrets because they start having feelings for one another, and she would just like shut it down. Didn't want to know about his life. She didn't even know his job. Like she didn't know anything about what he was doing in town. So then when she finally does find out, and then she gets really mad about it and takes it out on him, I was just like, girl, you didn't want to know, like chill out. And then there's some drama as well towards the end of the story, which I wasn't a big fan of, but otherwise I really liked this one. I gave it 4 stars. And I finished out the Jameson Valley series with The Candle Palace. This is book 6, which is a novella for the series. This one we have got a glimpse of the hero and the heroine's romance throughout the entire series, and so in this, it's told through flashback of the heroine telling all of her friends like, oh, so like this is how we met back in the day. So in this one, the heroine is a nurse, and she works for a hospital like burn care unit, which one of her patients jokingly nicknamed the Candle Palace because of, you know, the burns. So one day she gets a new patient in, which is the hero, and he comes in with multiple burns, and they're both immediately pulled to one another. And then he is from Jameson Valley, and he's kind of hoping the whole time that he can convince the heroine to go back with him one day. So this one had a little bit of a forbidden aspect, just because when the rest of the people at the hospital find out that the heroine is kind of spending extra time with the hero and like time after work with him, that she gets in trouble because they're like, hey, you can't cross this line, like he's still a patient. So they kind of pull her off of his care team and all of that. So their relationship is a bit forbidden there for a bit. This one does have content warning for sexual harassment in the workplace. But the romance in here is super cute and sweet, and I really enjoyed this one, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read My Life in Shambles by Karina Halley. This was actually a reread for me. I read this book first like 3 years ago, right when it came out, and then I got this special edition cover, which I will show here, with the fun Polaroids. So when I got this special edition cover in August, I definitely wanted to reread it. So this one has a one-night stand, it has fake engagement, the hero is an Irish rugby player, and the heroine is on vacation from America with her sisters in Ireland, and that's how they meet. This book does deal with heavier themes, so it has like a dying parent, it deals with cancer, mental health, chronic illness, grief, and loss. The beginning of the story is the heroine. She is living in the US, and she loses her fiance, her apartment, and her job all within like a matter of days, and she's just kind of like, you know, over life when she goes home to spend the holidays with her family. Her sisters are all gearing up for a girls trip to Ireland and convince her to join them. And then the hero and the heroine, they meet at that bar, and they end up spending the rest of the night together, like dancing. They go to a restaurant, they go to a club, and then of course they kiss on New Year's Eve. The hero invites her back to his house. He tells her that he had gotten bad news earlier that day about his father, like he has a bad relationship with his father. They're kind of estranged, and he just found out that his father is actually dying from cancer. So he doesn't want to be alone that night and invites her back to his house. So they have a very passionate night together, and then the next morning they are both like, you know what, I kind of don't want this to end. And so the hero is like, I have a crazy idea, like what if you join me? I have to go on this road trip back to my small town, which is Shambles, and what if you join me and like pretend to be my fake fiance, so that before my father dies, like he knows that I am, you know, happy, successful, and all of that. So they go back to his hometown together. We get a little bit of their road trip and then all of their time in this small town in Ireland, which was fun to see. Like I mentioned, it does deal with a lot of mental health, and then the hero is also recently diagnosed with MS at the age of 29, and so he's kind of dealing with that. He has a very aggressive form of it. Just really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read an arc of Runaway Groomsman by Megan Quinn. This comes out on October 11th. So I definitely have some hate and love moments with Megan Quinn books. The only series that I found that I love from her is the Getting Lucky series. This one, basically the hero is a Hollywood movie screenwriter, and then his ex-girlfriend, who's an actress, and his best friend, who's an actor, like in one of his like romantic movies, they actually end up cheating on him, and then they end up getting married. And so at the beginning of the story, it's their wedding, and he is kind of forced to be a groomsman by kind of the whole like Hollywood industry, you know, like to not leave things on bad terms. So he's a groomsman in their wedding, and then the whole time he's thinking like, why am I up here? This sucks. Like they cheated on me. I hate them. Like, why do I even want to be here? So he totally takes off, like runs down the aisle while the couple are mid vows and takes off. And so this becomes, you know, of course, on social media. So he kind of has to go hide out for a while, and he ends up in this super small town in California where the heroine lives and works. So on his first night in the small town, the hero goes straight to the bar, and then the heroine is there with some friends, and she recognizes him immediately. They actually had like a blind date in the past that went horribly, and it was like her worst date ever. And so she's like, oh my God, like why is this dude here? And when she talks to him, she realizes he has no idea who she is. He doesn't even remember like meeting her ever. So in this one, the heroine is in her small town to help out her grandfather. He has Alzheimer's, and he owns these like cabin rentals. So the heroine's trying to help him get the business up and going and kind of renovate and things like that, and help take care of her grandfather while she's there as well. This one, the romance was definitely lacking for me. This read more as like a traditional women's fiction instead. Everyone has a boyfriend for like over 65% of the book. Her and the hero don't really spend a lot of time together, and then once they do get together, it's like insta love immediately. They love one another, like all of these things, and I'm just like, where was this buildup? Like, where did this come from? The parts I did like of the book was the hero. He kind of forms a special friendship and bond with the heroine's grandfather, who has Alzheimer's. He starts helping him out around the cabin, and like their kind of little friendship situation was the best part of the book for me. But yeah, it's definitely not what I wanted in a romance, because I'd rather believe the hero and the heroine's relationship more than I believe the chemistry between the hero and her grandfather. So yeah, I gave this one 2.5 stars. I reread The Husbandsitter by Jessica Cain. I gave this one 5 stars. I originally read this like a couple years ago, and there are scenes from this novella that live like rent-free in my mind. Which if you read Jessica Cain before, you know those novellas are wild and crazy, but definitely a fun time. Definitely have to suspend your disbelief to get into these novellas, but you know, they're just a wild ride. The heroine is like a very strong empath, and she was raised in this like self-proclaimed hippie compound in California. And so, and when the story starts, her mother tells her like, you need to go out and share your love and share like yourself with the rest of the world. Like, you know, we can't keep you in this small little community. So the heroine sets out to go do that. She looks in help wanted and finds a job, and they're looking for a non-judgmental young woman to create a unique, loving community with 3 families. So the heroine ends up meeting Mrs. Black, Mrs. Red, and Mrs. Blue, and they all want to hire the heroine to satisfy their husbands for them part-time. This one is honestly just kink and fun. It's super short. There is a scene with each like couple situation. So in one of the couples, the wife is like older than her husband, who used to be a French escort, and she's just like super busy and successful with her work. And so she's like, I know my husband like wants some extra time. Like he has all this energy, so I need you to like help him out. And he also has this like stepsister, stepbrother kink. So that happens. In the second couple, the wife is married to an NFL player, like a retired NFL player, and it's about to be her 50th birthday. And she's always had this kink to catch her husband cheating on her. So that is that situation. And with the third couple, the wife of that one, she is married to a politician, and she knows he has this like daddy kink. And so she doesn't enjoy it herself and wants somebody to come fulfill that role for her. So yeah, these are all fun. I love that the wives were like behind it as well, and they just kind of become this whole like, I don't even know, family. It's a fun time. Like if it isn't your cup of tea, that's totally fine, but it works for me. So 5 stars. So next up is Daisy Darker, which is the newest thriller release from Alice Feeney. I have read a couple of her books in the past. So I read His and Hers, loved that one. And then I also read Rock, Paper, Scissors, didn't enjoy that one, but this one I actually really liked and gave it 4 stars. This one has some nods and winks to the classic Agatha Christie and Then There Were None, which I love. Anytime any thriller writer does like a retelling of that or has like nods and winks to it, I definitely pick it up. So this one, the main character is Daisy Darker, and her whole family is supposed to come together for her grandmother's 80th birthday. The family is definitely dysfunctional and haven't been together in a long time. And so now it's going to be all of them together, which is Daisy, her 2 sisters, her niece, her mom and dad who are divorced, and then of course the grandmother. So the grandmother owns this house in Cornwall, and it's out on the coast. So like when the tide is out, you can access the house, and when the tide comes in, no one is able to leave or come to the house, which I thought was a really fun aspect. I love books that take place like within one night, which is what this does. And like each chapter will remind you like there's 5 hours left until the tide goes out. Like there's 4 hours left until the tide goes out. So I loved that kind of drama and anticipation and kind of the angst that it leads to for like all the happenings in the house. And you know that like there's no way for these people to leave. So basically at dinner on the first night, the grandmother tells everybody that like, you know, she went to like a fortune teller or something and they told her she wouldn't live past her 80th year. And since it's her 80th birthday, she wants to read the will to the family and let everybody know what they're going to get from her, because the grandmother is like a super successful children's story writer. So then after they all find out that, the grandmother ends up dead. And then after that, the entire night, like one by one, the family starts to get murdered and, you know, everything goes from there. The whole like isolated feeling and the dysfunctional family I really enjoyed. I will say all of the twists and turns like I saw very early on into the story, but it didn't take away from me enjoying it. I just kind of felt like I was in on it as well. So while it wasn't surprising for me, I still really enjoyed it and thought it was entertaining. Next, I read Always Been You by QB Tyler. This is her newest release, I believe. This is a taboo romance because the hero and the heroine were raised as adopted siblings together. This has age gap. The hero is, I believe, 11 years older than the heroine. So this one, the heroine was adopted into the family when she was 2. The hero was already like a teenager when she was adopted. They always had a close relationship growing up, but then once she starts to grow up, you know, he had moved out of the house and went to college and all of that. So when the story starts, the heroine is now 18 and she's away at college and she lives in the same city that the hero does. So they spend a lot of their time together, and then right before winter break, they end up giving in to their feelings. This one was fine. I gave it 3 stars. The whole story is pretty much about them giving in to their feelings and temptation, and then kind of wondering or worrying or dealing with how their family's gonna react. I wanted more angst. This one wasn't really angsty at all to me because they're like giving in all over the place, like even at their family's house before anybody knows, like they're getting it on in the basement. There's definitely a lot of steam, but I guess I just wanted more story or plot or something to go along with these characters because I never was pulled in by them. So yeah, 3 stars for this one. Next, I decided to get back to the Ice Home series by Ruby Dixon. So I read Penny's Protector, which is book 10 in the series. This one I ended up giving 4 stars to. The hero in this one is a super cinnamon roll, even though he does drug and steal the heroin at one point. These two, they actually end up liking and getting along really well pretty early on. They both want resonance to happen, which is kind of the mating bond situation in this world. Just tons of fun, sweet, and romantic and swooning moments from the hero trying to get the heroine to fall for him. And then we even get a fun, like, human wedding on this ice planet. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. So then I read Mari's Mistake, which is book 11 in the Ice Home series. This one I also gave 4 stars to. It was fun because we actually go back to the very beginning of the series with an event that went down in book 1. And so it is a couple from there. This one actually has a second chance situation, which is rare in this world just because of that resonance or like mating bond. The hero was actually injured after an event that goes down in the beginning of the story, and the heroine and him decide to have the healer like turn off their resonance bond, which is so the hero's body can kind of focus on healing instead of trying to deal with this like whole mating bond situation instead. When they turned off that bond, it kind of made the heroine kind of be emotionally detached from the hero. She doesn't enjoy his touch at all, like it repulses her now. And so they have this whole like second chance situation because they are still mates, and then like how are they going to work through this and get back together. This one was really sad to see because the heroine is like heartbroken and suffering during all of this. Like her mind is telling her, you know, this is your mate, you still like, I still want him and want to be with him, but then her body is just like disgusted and revolted by him. Love the hero in this. He fights for their romance the whole time and kind of has to figure out new ways to please his mate, which was fun to see, and I gave it 4 stars. So then I jumped into Devney Perry's Eden series, and the first one is Indigo Ridge. This is a small town series set in Montana, and it follows the Eden family. In this one, the heroine is new in town. She becomes the new chief of police, and on her first night, she's out at like a local bar and ends up seeing the hero there. They kind of both assume that the other one is not local, and they spend like a steamy night together in his truck. The next day is when they realize that both of them live in town and are gonna have to be around each other a lot. And this, the hero has taken over his family's ranch, and so he has been kind of just doing that life. And one day on his ranch, one of the ranch hands finds a dead body that had jumped off of Indigo Ridge. So the heroine gets called out to check out, you know, what happened. And then everybody's telling her like, yeah, this is the 7th suicide in 10 years in this small town. So then she wants to look into it because she's like, 7 suicides in 10 years in a small town, all but 1 have been women, like something fishy is going on here. And so she decides to start looking into it. So I loved this one. I really loved the Eden family and how they kind of just embrace her and bring her into their fold. The heroine's grandfather lives in town as well. He's actually the mayor there. And so I liked her relationship with her grandfather. And since all of Devney Perry's books all exist in the same world, we actually get a little crossover moment. We see the hero and hear about the heroine from the Birthday List, which is one of my favorite books from her in the Mason Jar duet. I will say that the mystery suspense element of the book, I wasn't a super fan of how that went down, but I really loved the romance in here, and then of course the entire Eden family. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. Then I read Juniper Hill and gave this one 5 stars. This is the second book in the Eden series by Devney Perry. The heroine in this one, she has a young baby and she decides to leave her New York life and come to small town Montana. She was born and raised in like a super wealthy family, but because of some situations with her family, they kind of disowned her and left her with nothing. So she took off with her son and moved to Quincy, Montana, and becomes a housekeeper at the Eloise Inn, which is one of the businesses that the Eden family owns. She actually ends up working at the inn, and she actually also ends up living with the hero, or kind of in his garage apartment loft on his property. And the hero is the chef and owner of the restaurant at the inn. This one I really felt for the heroine. She is a struggling single mom who's just trying to make it through each day. Her son has colic, and so he keeps her up at night, and she's just like, you know, struggling to make it through. So with her son having colic and kind of crying and being awake all night, one night the hero, he hears it from where he lives in the house and decides to come out to the garage loft where they live. And he's like, hey, like, hand over the baby, like, give him to me. Maybe he needs like new arms, a new voice, like just hand him over so we can all get some sleep. The hero at first is very like put off by the heroine, doesn't want to get involved or be around her and her son because of some things going on in his past. But over time, he starts to fall really hard for not only the heroine, but her son as well, and becomes just, you know, enwrapped in their life. This one was just so good and emotional. I loved seeing these two come together. And then of course, all the businesses and the work that they're doing as well. And just seeing the entire Eden family, you know, bring in the heroine and her son was sweet to see. So yeah, 5 stars for this one. Next, I read Garnet Flats, the third and most recent book out in the Eden series by Devney Perry. This one I had a harder time with. It's actually my least favorite in the series so far. I ended up giving it, I think, 4 stars, but I probably rounded up from 3.5 stars. This one is a second chance romance with the heroine being a doctor, and she's one of the Eden siblings. And it is a second chance romance with her ex-boyfriend and like ex-love of her life is an MMA fighter, and he comes to town and purchases a gym to be close to her and win her back. So they were together 7 years ago, and then we find out that when she ended up like switching schools, he actually ended up marrying her best friend, and so that is what kind of drove them apart. So I loved that angst that could have came from this second chance romance. I was just kind of frustrated with the hero. I didn't really like him. I didn't like the reasonings of why he married her best friend, and I thought he could have done a lot more groveling. And then the heroine, I really wish she would have stood up for herself more as well. Like at work, nobody takes her seriously. They're all used to like, hey, you like grew up here, like you're not really a doctor. They never want her to care for them. Like patients, they'll be like, can we have like a real doctor? Like you have no experience. Nobody calls her Dr. Eden. They just call her by her first name, which I was like, girl, tell them like to call you Dr. Eden, like take charge, go off on these people. I just wanted that to happen. And second chances are one of my favorite tropes to read, but in this one, I really felt like we were missing out by not having flashbacks of their previous relationship, or maybe seeing it at the beginning, seeing that connection that they had together. We just jump in after the fact and are told about this like romance and a great connection they had, and so we never really saw that. Of course, though, I love the Eden family as a whole, so anytime they were on page, I loved it. I wanted to see more of that. Yeah, some of the choices that the hero makes and kind of his explanation or reasoning, or like not telling her things and her running off when it's like he's trying to explain what went down, like just sit down and listen to what happened. I wanted that to happen sooner. There's some surprises in this one as well. It took me by surprise, and I was like, what? So it's definitely entertaining, just not my favorite, but it does set up the next book in the series, Jasper Vale, which comes out, I think, in January, and so I'm super excited for that one. We already found out about the setup for that couple. Next, I read When the Stars Fall by Emery Rose. This is the first book in her Lost Stars series. I read this because this author is supposed to also be at that Love in Vegas event. I'd never read her books before. This one is an angsty second chance romance between childhood friends that torn apart and kind of fall back together a few different times in their lives. The story takes place over a couple of decades. It starts when the heroine is just 9 years old and meets the hero for the first time. She becomes really good friends with the hero and his cousin. They're all around the same age, like 9 and 10 when they meet. So at first, the hero and the heroine, they become best friends when they're children, and then as they grow up and become teens and deal with all of those feelings, they kind of have a falling out, and then they get back together like when they're 17 or 18. That's when we get most of their relationship, is when they're that 17, 18 range. Right after high school graduation, the hero had always planned to go away into the Marines, and so he takes off in 5 years, and he has 3 consecutive back-to-back deployments. When he comes back, he's definitely a very different man. He has a lot of PTSD from everything. He also has a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury, from a bomb blast that he went through while he was deployed. So he's just very angry, confused, forgetful. He drinks heavily. He has nightmares and will wake up like choking her or grabbing her wrists. And so they're definitely dealing with a lot. So they end up dealing with some loss together and splitting up. We cut to 6 years later and he comes back into her life and has gotten better. And then he finds out that, you know, she has some surprises for him that since he's been away. So this one was okay for me. I ended up giving it 3 stars. So I love angst, but I didn't feel like the angst in this one was a big enough payoff for me in the end for the relationship. I thought the first half was definitely a little too drawn out with the whole childhood stories and all those flashbacks. And once they're adults, the time just like jumps super fast. And I felt like that was the time we needed to take more time with. So would have liked to have seen or have heard of how the hero dealt with the PTSD after he left those like missing years, because we just jump to, you know, like he's healthier and better without like talking about what he actually went through. And towards the end of this, I actually kind of wish with how some surprises happen at the end of the story, I kind of wish the story would have went a different route for the entire situation, but I won't say too much because it will give away a plot in the story. So yeah, 3 stars for this one. And then it does have some content warning for a parent with cancer as well as miscarriage. Next, I read Muses and Melodies. This is the 3rd book in the Hush Note standalone series, and this one is written by Rebecca Yarros. So since I loved Riffs and Refrains by Daphne Perry, I decided to check out this one because it exists in the same world, follows one of the other bandmates of Hush Note. This one we follow the band's lead guitarist, and he has recently just come out of rehab when the story starts. Heroine, who has already worked for the band for years, she ends up becoming his handler, like to make sure he doesn't get into anything, doesn't, you know, relapse while they have all these tour dates and deadlines to meet for the band. I love the forced proximity in this one because of course the heroine moves in with the hero, you know, to keep him on the straight and narrow path. The hero is definitely a tortured soul who has gone through a lot and definitely has to deal with all of those feelings still. But I really love this one. I loved how the heroine was always in the hero's corner. So I gave this one 4 stars. Then I jumped back to the Ice Home series and read the 12th book in the series, which is Raven's Return. This one I gave 4 stars. When the hero and the heroine both have secrets from their past and they both feel like that they're not good enough for the other person, which both of their secrets come out and they're kind of both a non-thing for everybody. But to them, you know, they're everything and they feel like they can't be together. So the angst of that was really good to see. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. Then I read Bridget's Bane, the 13th book in the Ice Home series. And this one I gave 3 stars. This one has been a romance kind of happening or building in the background for quite a few of the books. And holy non-communication. Like this book drove me crazy with the non-communication of the characters and the most stubborn of stubborn characters ever for both the hero and the heroine. This one I do feel like the book was a little too long as well, which made the dragging out of their situation just feel like it was going on for forever. I just wanted to shake these characters and be like, talk already and get this out so you can be happy and be together. When the hero and the heroine ended up having a night together and becoming pleasure mates on the planet. And it did not go well at all for the heroine. Like it was the worst time ever. She was uncomfortable, she hurt, like it was just a hot mess. But the hero thought it was the greatest time ever and that they're mates and they have to be together now. And so instead of telling him like, dude, that was not comfortable for me, I did not have a fun time, she decides to just ignore that and they kind of avoid each other for months and months and months. After a bit, they do end up becoming friends. They actually become mates as well when resonance kicks in, and so they have to kind of deal with all of this. But again, they still don't talk about it to each other. They talk about it to other people in the community as part of their tribe. So she goes and talks to somebody else about it, he goes and talks to somebody else about it, and it's like, yo, you guys, like, get together and talk about your issues, talk to each other instead of telling everybody else around the camp what's going on. So they finally end up bringing in a couples counselor who comes and talks to them. Yeah, but this romance was just too drawn out. They're too stubborn. All the miscommunication or the lack of communication just drove me bonkers. Of course, there are some super sweet moments in here, mostly from the hero for me, of him wanting to be around her and take care of her and just, you know, protect her and be a friend to her. But yeah, 3 stars for Bridget's Bane for me. Then I read an arc of Captured by a Sinner. This is the 5th book in Michelle Hurd's Sinners Mafia series, which this is already out now on Kindle Unlimited. This one starts off as a captor-captive situation. The heroine, her entire family gets killed when she's just 17 by the hero and some of his, like, priesthood friends. And so the hero, who's 25 at the time, decides to kidnap the heroine and take her back to his house. And he decides he's gonna like protect her and care for her until she turns 18. And then shortly after that, he finds out like she's gonna be 18 in 5 days. So then he changes it. Okay, like I'm gonna keep you until you're 21 because I want to make sure once you go back out in the world, like you can take care of yourself and you're over the grief and all of that. So this, we do get a little bit of time of them right before she turns 18 and him kind of like falling for her and wanting to do all these sweet things with her. And then we have a time jump and we cut to, it's just like a week or two before her 21st birthday. So we miss out on all of those years. We don't see any of their friendship or bond that they form. And then we just have them like finally giving into their feelings and jumping into bed together, which it felt like it came out of nowhere because we didn't see that build up. Then of course she's 21 now and she decides to leave, even though they just kind of started up their little relationship together and start to have feelings for one another. And when she leaves, she ends up getting pulled into this whole, like, I believe Italian mafia situation of her family were like the Sicilian mafia and they owed a debt to them and all of this. So she ends up needing to be rescued by the hero, and then they go back and it's their romance again. This one I definitely wanted to see more of the buildup of the relationship and the chemistry earlier on into the book. A lot of it, they're not even together because of when she leaves his house. We do get to see some of it towards the end of the building up of their relationship, but it all wraps up pretty quickly. So yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. So this series kind of went downhill for me. Book 1 and 2, I believe I gave both of those 4 stars. And since then it was like 2, 3, and 3 for me. Next, I read The Rivalry by Nikki Sloan, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. This is a fun college sports romance. And the hero and the heroine, they go to different colleges and they're like major rivals. The heroine is the cheerleader captain for Ohio State, and then the hero is a football player for Michigan. The heroine, her entire family has been major Ohio State fans. Like her father was even a coach back in the day. Her mom actually gave birth to her like after a game, and so she has just been living and breathing Ohio State like since the day she was born. One day she is at a friend's wedding and the hero is there as well, and they end up meeting, and right before that her friend was like, hey, like for one night can you just not talk about football, not talk about sports, like keep that off your radar. And so when she meets the hero, they don't get to talk about what they do or where they go to college, and so they end up hitting it off. So when she gets home later, he had like given her his digits in her phone, and when she gets home she's checking it to text him and she realizes he only put in 6 digits instead of 7 and like had forgotten to write that last number. So she's able to find out from friends like where he usually hangs out. She goes to that bar, meets him, and then she realizes that she's at a fan bar for Michigan, and you know, it goes from there of realizing who one another is. The heroine definitely is the one with more of the issue of that they're from these rival colleges. The hero's like, I don't care, I like you, like who cares about that type of stuff? But the heroine is like, oh my god, this is a big deal, like my family will care about this, I care about this, like what will my friends and teammates think? Liked the forbidden aspect of this, of like just going to those rival schools and dealing with all of that. Rivalry though is definitely over the top at times, of course, with how far they take it. But for being bitter rivals, I thought it was kind of wild that the heroine and her family like have no idea who the hero is or like that he's on the team. I feel like if you were, you know, that anti another team, you would know all of their players, but like they don't know him. But whatever, that was just an issue for me, I guess. But minus the rivalry moments, this was actually a very low angst, light read, especially coming from Nikki Sloan. So I give this one 3.5 stars. Next, I read an arc of Her Lessons in Persuasion by Megan Frampton. This actually doesn't come out until January 24th of 2023, which I believe this is the first arc that I've read for the new year. This one I end up giving it 3.5/ rounded up to 4 stars on Goodreads. This one is the first in a new series and has a lot of fun moments. This has a fake relationship, there's class difference. The heroine is one who's a lady, and then the hero is a working lawyer. There is the grumpy heroine and the more sunshine hero. The heroine is also an astronomer, which I love seeing a scientist heroine. And then the hero is very bookish. Like he even has a monthly meeting that he meets up with his friends and they chat about books and life, which was fun. On this one, the heroine is 24 and she's counting down the days, which is I believe 6 months until her birthday, where she can gain her inheritance. So she only cares about her dog, her aunt, her books, which she only reads nonfiction because she loves facts, her telescope, and astronomy. Like if she has those 5 things, she is good to go. So she has a reputation of being a bit of a grump. So the hero is just an ordinary man. He was raised in an orphanage, which is nicknamed the School for Scoundrels, which is the name of this series. So him and his friends have grown up since childhood. They're together. I believe each book is going to be about one of these boys. So he's just really worked really hard for the life that he has now. And he only has time for his work and his friends and his books. So one night he's coming home from work and he has a little misunderstanding. He sees the heroine up on a bridge and assumes the worst, so goes to rescue her. And then after the fact, she tells him like, I was only up there to look at the stars, like I wasn't gonna jump. So he ends up escorting her home, and at the end of it, she surprises herself too by kissing him. So they end up meeting later on at like a bachelor style auction where her new stepmother ends up bidding on the hero to hang out with the heroine. Her stepmother and father actually want the fake dating situation to happen, which I thought was a fun little twist, that it wasn't the hero and heroine fake dating, it was her parents setting this up because they want, you know, people interested in their daughter, and they're like, hey, if a dude's interested in you, like other dudes will flock around you. This one, both characters are very quirky. They're actually both virgins, which was fun to see, and I just loved their bookish ways. I liked seeing the hero and heroine realize they have a lot in common together. Towards the end of the book, it starts focusing more on like this whole society thing that the heroine's trying to get into, which I wanted less of that and more back to the romance. Otherwise, this is a sweet historical romance with low angst and slow burn. So 3.5, 4 stars for this one, and it is out January 24th, 2023. Next, I read The Moon-Blooded Breeding Clinic by C.M. Nacosta. This is the 3rd book in her Cambric Creek series. So I've enjoyed the rest of the books in this series and this kind of whole community that exists in Cambric Creek, where a bunch of like paranormals and monsters and humans live together. So this one I actually ended up not liking at all, ended up giving it 2 stars. I never am one who skim reads, but with this book I was skim reading, like I was not enjoying it. Felt like we spent a lot of the time just on unnecessary details, random characters, random backstory, like just all this inner monologue that I wasn't wanting to read. This one, basically the hero is a wolf and he is like a globetrotting photographer when the pandemic happens in the human world and he has to come back to Cambric Creek. And then the heroine is a human woman who recently went through a divorce. She was married to like, I believe, a lizard man in the past. And so there was some incompatibility with their having a baby. This book definitely deals a lot with fertility. Obviously it's called, you know, the breeding clinic. So the heroine ends up finding out from one of her friends who dealt with infertility in the past as well. That friend is now pregnant. And so she's like, how did you do this? Where did you go? So she hears about this wolf like breeding clinic. Breeding clinic is set up to help like interspecies couples who deal with like infertility or troubles getting pregnant to be able to have a child together. But instead of like a sperm bank situation, this is like an actual breeding clinic where the woman gets with the werewolf. So there's a whole like syncing up to the moon cycle, the nodding, which is, you know, going to increase the fertility situation and all of that. So while this story sounds pretty straightforward from how I'm describing it, the story just meanders a ton. It takes a lot of time to get to the story. Like the couple don't even meet until I think like about 35% of the story. There are quite a few time jumps as well, like mid-scene you'll time jump. There's a lot of relaying information back to you again that you just read in the previous chapter. A few times I'd be reading and we're now in the hero's POV and I'm like, didn't I just read this scene? And I'd scroll back to make sure I didn't skip pages, and then I'm like, okay, no, we just read it in the heroine's POV and now I'm getting it again in his. Like, can we just not? But when the couple is together, it is really good. I liked seeing that. We just didn't see enough of it for me. In this, the breeding clinic kind of becomes a non-thing because to break the ice beforehand, the heroine decides to like interview and meet the hero like out at a coffee shop together first. So their breaking the ice moment ends to them hitting it off and getting along really well. They decide to, hey, like let's kiss so we're not kissing in front of the clinic people later. Like, oh, let's take this further. Like, let me see what you got working with under your pants. Like then, oh, let's like go to the hotel room and try it out because like, you know, we don't want the first time to be in the clinic. So it leads into them having a relationship before they even get to the clinic. The heroine also kind of makes some choices that I wasn't a fan of in the story later on. And then kind of the whole pandemic situation, like the way it was addressed or kind of talked about, just kind of felt off to me. I don't know. I just kind of got a weird vibe from it. 2 stars for this one, sadly for me. Then I read Shattered Sea. This is the 4th book in Catherine Cowell's Tattered and Torn series. I read this the day that it came out. This one, the story is super heartbreaking right from the beginning. The prologue is the heroine and she is in high school with her like love of her life and her friends. They end up getting into a car accident and she loses her boyfriend. So you're like just immediately invested emotionally into her story. Cut to years later, and because of that accident, the heroine has had chronic back pain ever since. So she's dealing with that every day of her life. She also works at an art gallery and she is an anonymous photographer who has like pictures on the wall, but like nobody at the art gallery knows that they're hers. One day the hero, he's a famous actor and he's there to like research a part in town. He arrives and he comes to the art gallery, purchases one of the heroine's pictures, not knowing that she took it, and then him and her kind of hit it off from there. So I really liked how the hero and heroine, they're both pulled to one another from the start. They both realize that each other has dealt with grief and loss, and so they kind of connect over that. Have just very sweet and tender moments in their romance. Around the same time, in the background of this, the heroine is realizing that all of her friends, or those high school friends that were involved in the car accident in the past, they're all starting to turn up dead one by one. Her own life is possibly in danger as well. Yeah, this was a super sweet romance. There's definitely that external like suspense plot happening as well. But yeah, so I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and I'm super excited for the 5th book in the series, which I believe is the last one, and I think it comes out next month. Then I read Runaway Road. This is the 1st book in the Runaway series by Devney Perry. Of course, I have been binging all of her series. This is the last one that I have to finish to be caught up on her Devney Perry books, and then I can switch over to her Willa Nash pen name. Loved the premise of the story. It says 1 car, 1 cross-country road trip, 5 stories about 6 runaways finally finding home. On the author's note at the end, it talks about how Devney Perry loved the Boxcar Children series when she was growing up, and how she was looking at those one day on her shelves and was wondering what those children would have been up to as adults. So this this is where she got the inspiration for this series. So I love that whole idea of this series. I grew up reading the Boxcar Children series, and then my daughter has read them as well, and so I couldn't wait to read this series and find out what Devney Perry did with the books. So when the heroine is newly divorced, and she's always kind of been on the run. Like, she left home when she was 16. Her parents were more interested in drugs than her, and she ended up living in a junkyard with her friends as a teenager, and she like spent 2 years of her life living in the back of this Cadillac. Now she takes said Cadillac and decides to go on a road trip to meet up with some of those friends that she grew up with. She wants to pass on the car to them. And so along the way she's going to try to go from Boston to California, but along the way she ends up getting her car broken down in West Virginia and ends up in a small town there, which is where she meets the hero. So the hero owns the local garage shop. He's the mechanic when her car is brought in. Since it's a small town, they end up running into one another a lot. His house is actually located right next to the motel where she stays. And so they have like dinners together and they meet up to talk about her car, and they just kind of form this relationship naturally together. But the whole time it's a bit of a slow burn because they both know that her time in this town has a time limit, like that she's planning on leaving once the car is fixed. I love this romance. I love the very like low inks, kind of that low key, just chill vibes from it. Hero actually has a son as well. He has a teenage son, which the hero and his ex-wife, they were like high school sweethearts and teen parents, so we kind of get that single parent aspect as well. There's a teeny little bit of suspense in here happening as well, just kind of in the background, which was, you know, kind of low-key as well. I did enjoy this one. I gave it 3.5/4 stars. This also had the setup for the next book in the series, which I'm excited to check that out because somebody else ends up taking over the car from her and continuing on the road trip. I can't wait to continue this series. Then I decided to reread Manage by Kristen Callahan. This is part of her VIP series. This is book 2, but you can definitely read this as a standalone. It's the only one I've read in the series. I first read this like 3 years ago and decided I wanted to reread it again, so I grabbed the audio of it. And I just love this one. It is a grumpy hero, kind of rock star adjacent. He is the manager of the band, and the heroine comes to work with the band as kind of their social media liaison and like photographer. So this starts out with the heroine. She is on her way to London for the interview for her job, and she ends up, you know, being upgraded to first class, and she can't believe it. And then all of a sudden the hero shows up on the plane, and he's like, excuse me, like I booked both of those seats, like why is somebody sitting next to me? And so it starts from there. They have great banter. We find out the hero has a fear of flying, and so the heroine kind of pokes and prods and messes with him to kind of get his mind off of the flying. There's tons of banter and just fun teasing between them. Their chemistry is just so good right from the start. So then when they get to London, they realize they're going to be working together. Hero also deals with insomnia and he can't sleep, and he realizes the last time that he got a good night's sleep was when he accidentally fell asleep with the heroine. So he asks her like, hey, can you join me on my tour bus and like just sleep with me, but like legit just sleep with me because so I can get some sleep as well. So their relationship is a bit of a slow burn, but kind of starts off from there. I just love this one. The hero has a bit of a hard past. The heroine has a bit of a complicated past with the band, which thankfully gets smoothed over. They're both just very lonely souls who kind of find one another and become, you know, everything to each other. The romance is definitely slow burn, but definitely worth it. So 5 stars for this one. So those are the 27 books I have read so far for the first half of September. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books I talked about, or maybe what your favorite read has been for September. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want any more of my thoughts or my full reviews on any of these books, I have them all on Goodreads, which is linked in the description of this video. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.